Hey everyone, I'm THPine and welcome back to the second part of my faction guide for Heroes Hour. Let's start with the Great Lament. The Lament's armies are hard to kill. Some of the units, like the Truckserker or the Minotaur, rely on defensive skills like Sturdy and Insensate. Other units use more indirect approaches, like the Gorgon with Petrification or the Nightmare with Confusion. But even if your units go down, you can resurrect them with the Arbiter. Your units have very strong defensive capabilities, but they lack offense. Especially in the early game, you don't have any strong damage dealers. Your late game unit is the aspect of Shadows. With a lot of HP and skills like Ethereal and Terror, it is really tough to kill. It also summons shadow clones of your enemies, which will fight for you in battle, which is important because the unit lacks direct impact on the battlefield itself. For heroes, the Lament relies on very strong spellcasters, which is important because they have to make up for the lack of offensive capabilities of their units. They have a lot of strong spells and also can summon shadow clones of your or your enemy's units. For buildings, they have the Idol of Shadows, which allows you to weaken your opponent's armies, which can be very useful when you're in a tough spot. The Monolith gives your heroes a +1 bonus to spell power whenever they cast a spell. This bonus, however, resets at the start of each week, so your heroes are stronger towards the end of the week, which makes timing very important. Slave Pens give you gold, but they're only really effective if you have non-lament creatures in your garrison, so make sure you find some. The Temple of Dragons gives you access to dragons, one of the strongest late game units in the game, and they become even stronger throughout battle. Overall, the Lament have a rough start, but they become a real powerhouse in the late game. Tide Islands is the naval faction of the game. Almost all of the Tide's units have the aquatic ability, which allows them to re-enter combat after falling off a boat. Very useful if you're fighting on the sea. A lot of the units, like the Cannoneer, the Ferryman or the Cancery, are very slow, but they usually have other abilities that make up for it. They also have a lot of displacement abilities, like Knockback on the Cannoneer, the Ferryman or the Geyserol, or Grapple on the Harpooner. These are especially useful in naval battles. For late game, they have the Phoenix, which is a flying unit that sets your enemies on fire. And it can be reborn once in an explosion of even more fire. The Tide has really strong heroes, which are the backbone of their armies. They can summon elementals with Conflux or displace their enemies with Siren Song. For buildings, they have Temple of Tides, which gives you free boats and allows you to teleport heroes back home when they're out on sea. Did I mention this is the naval faction? Pearl Market allows your heroes to find pearls, which you can use to increase your unit's growth rates, and Pearl Shrine will give you a pearl and makes it easier to find some. Overall, the Tide is, as mentioned, the naval faction. It's really strong on sea and fairly weak on land. The EARTHEN is the dwarf faction of the game. A lot of the units are sturdy, like the Miner, the Mine Watch or the Ice Engine. Especially interesting is the Miner's taxpayer ability. It gives you extra gold, which is a significant boost to your economy, especially in early game. There's also the Gold Earthen, which literally turns enemies into gold, which you can collect at the end of the combat, and when it dies, it becomes gold as well. For late game, you have the Cave Regent, which has a lot of health and leaps into the enemy armies, causing havoc with knockback, slowing and a decent amount of damage. While the Earthen's units are somewhat sturdy, ironically, their heroes rely on their creatures to die. They can use the souls of fallen comrades to summon new units with Crutch and Soul of the Earth. For buildings, they have the Runeforge, which gives you unique buffs to your armies, and the Monument of War, which allows you to hire powerful mercenaries. They can give you a significant boost to your armies early on in the game. They also have the Temple of War, which buffs your heroes. Overall, the Earthen is fairly strong in the early game, but they lack late game potential. The Pillars of Hasbeen's armies are very balanced. They have a healer with the Disciple, a flying unit with the Tree Crow, a tank with the Ponder, a long range unit with the Archer, a short range ranged unit with the Fire Lancer, and a Resurrector with the Balancer. And for late game, they have some nice bruisers with the Primal Monk and the Earth Tiger. For endgame, they have the Serpent of Gods, which is a spell-slinging flying unit that heals its allies. Their heroes are focused on keeping their armies alive. They use Balance and Union to heal units that are about to die. For buildings, they have the Tea House, which gives you unique buffs to your heroes. The Pillars of Essence allows you to summon creatures in exchange for rare resources, and the Pagoda of Heavens gives you gems. Gems are used to upgrade your dwellings, which means you can use other resources on other things. Overall, the Pillars have a very mediocre early and mid game, especially because gems are hard to come by. but if you give them enough time to upgrade their dwellings, they become very powerful. The Cult of Delirium is horror themed and has a lot of weird abilities. Especially interesting is the Hunger's Swallow ability, which makes it really easy to clear out low level camps at the start of the game, and the Shambler's Astral ability, which allows it to spawn wherever on the battlefield, for example right next to the enemy's squishy damage dealers. For endgame they have the Prince, which is a flying unit which can also spawn wherever it wants, and when it dies it resurrects allied units. The Delirium's heroes are here to create chaos. They can cause madness with Watcher or fear with Speaker. For buildings, they have the Idol of the Three, which gives them a unique extra unit per battle. The Forbidden Tome, which reduces your heroes' defenses but makes them more knowledgeable. And the Crystal of Tainting, which allows your heroes to taint minds. This means they will stop produce their regular resources and instead spawn cultists and small amounts of gold. And they also have the Lost Tavern, which replaces your regular tavern. Instead of hiring new heroes, you create clones of your main one. The Delirium is a strange faction with a lot of weird abilities, but they can become very dangerous, especially if they amass large amounts of cultists. That wraps it up. I'm TH Pine, thanks a lot for watching and see you next time.